electricity prices have once again gone up. Now, these price hikes follow the National Energy Regulator of South Africa's approval of Eskom tariff to increase to direct customers as well as municipalities. The price hikes are part of an urgent strategy to revive the utility, but have placed a growing burden on consumers, and particularly those who cannot afford to supplement with renewable energy. To find out how we can mitigate this problem, we're joined now by Director at Solar Advice, Mr. Armando da Silva, and Professor of Physics at the University of Johannesburg, Mr. Hartmut Winkler. A very good evening to you both, gentlemen. Let me start with you, Mr. da Silva. Let's talk about perhaps the reasons why there has been an escalation in the electricity price and who this affects the most.
Well, look, obviously, there's a number of reasons that have been brought to light. Unfortunately, just mismanagement, lack of care, corruptions, and so on have just put us all at a detriment to the whole structure. They're obviously doing some really good work at the moment, trying to fix everything. I can see some really great attempts. But unfortunately, we've all still left with the reality that, price hikes over the last few years have been up to like almost 400% changes, and I don't see any differences coming up. Unfortunately, we're the ones that, as citizens, are going to have to try and rectify that by paying for the mistakes.
Mr. Winkler, the situation is as it is now. But what are the options for South Africans? What can the average South African do if they're finding themselves in a position where all of this electricity, which is an essential service in many respects, is actually quite unaffordable for them?
Yeah, there's not very much that one can do in such a situation. As you point out, the lucky people that can afford a roof solar system can go about installing that, and by and large they can probably get by without even noticing when there's shortages. Plus, it will cost them a certain amount now, but within probably something of the order of 10 years, they would have paid off whatever that extra cost was. But as far as the other citizens concerned, you really just need to look at where can you manage savings in your own household. I think it's something that's been neglected in this country over the years. We're going to find that if you go to any house now, you're going to find a lot of wastages, lights which are on, things which are heaters which might be working which shouldn't be on. So that's about the only thing I can really think of that people need to try and look at exactly their household, look at where are they using electricity, how much, and so on. But maybe just go and look at your meter running as you're doing things, and see if you can't cut something there. But yes, that's almost always one of the consequences, and it's almost used as a strategy sometimes. I'm not saying it's happening here, but if you want people to use less electricity, make the price go up, and indeed it works. And we've seen it in this country. All the projections people have tried to figure out what will the consumption in this country be like 10 years down the line have usually overestimated what things really were, and that's in part because the price has been going up.
As far as tariffs are concerned, Mr. Winkler, do consumers pay more for prepaid electricity as opposed to perhaps electricity on account?
Oh, I can't give you the exact answer for that. I can't imagine it's going to be a huge difference if it is. So going one way or the other is, I don't think it's ultimately going to make a huge impact, but I stand to be corrected, maybe.
Mr. da Silva, Mr. Winkler spoke about alternate forms of electricity. Talk to us about these, as well as which are low-hanging fruits, which are attainable for the average consumer.
Okay, well look, I mean, I'm quite sure that a very obvious one, that in a general household for residential, your geyser is your greatest consumer. So, heating hot water is quite a luxury for a lot of people in South Africa, but ideally those ones that are able to afford it should actually, take a look at them, because there's very simple solutions that are available at the moment, just to even put things on timers or reduce the elements product type by putting a PTC element in that reduces it by 30% on your overall energy usage. That's very inexpensive. Geyser blankets, insulating your pipework. Those kind of applications are very affordable to most people. In fact, they'd probably pay themselves off in a matter of 3 or 4 months, even if you had to put the investment in. So anything to do with heating or cooling or stuff like that, there's a lot of old installations that have been done back in the day when we had the luxury of a lot of power that haven't actually then been looked at again. That these days there's a lot of cost-effective solutions to be done. So to start there would be the one. Your lighting, obviously, depending on your next level of availability and finances, it's a tough time. But to start at those points, I would say is a necessity for every household to do.
And talk to us about solar energy. That has been touted as an option for some. How does that work?
Well, solar energy is obviously the harnessing of energy from the sun. Just in terms of a necessity, not just for South Africa, but for the world, it is every first world country's direction. Just in terms of going green and not using fossil fuels for that, for that aspect. So I'm a firm believer for that reason. But, as we've come over the last few years, solar energy has always had a misconception that it's been extremely expensive and very complicated. But over just recently now, more and more, there's a lot of new installers or a lot of education that's been introduced into the South African industry that's made it easy. We, for instance, we've on our website have gone all about trying to make it as simple as possible, just to enlighten people how to make a right choice. It is definitely a necessity in terms of if we're all able to create our own power, we wouldn't have to pay for the mistakes of others, which unfortunately we're doing at the moment. Secondly, it will be a better future for the country itself. But there's a lot of hope and future for the country at the moment. Solar's going very well. So I'm very pleased to see the progress that it's done in our country, though.
Mr. Winkler, is solar energy a viable option for South Africa?
Oh, yes, yeah, more so than in most other countries in the world. And it's actually quite strange in the sense that in this country we are kind of lagging behind a lot of countries that have far, far less sun than we do here. We have quite a few advantages. I mean, apart from just the daylight hours and the number of times you can expect to have the sun out, which is on average quite a bit higher than somewhere else. But also we are a bit closer to the equator. It just means that the sun is a little bit higher in the sky, so we get that little bit of extra energy as well. So it really is something that we should be looking at, maybe getting half of our electricity from overall. But yes, that will take time. But we're nowhere near exploiting the solar power as much as we could. And yes, the problem is, yes, you do need to buy a system first. You also need some sort of batteries, something to store the electricity, because right now, with the sun not shining, you need to have it stored somewhere so it will last you a couple of hours into the night. But by and large, if you compare our country to others, especially say here, I'm here in Johannesburg, and in the winter, almost every day we'll have a certain number of sunshine hours. In other countries, you just don't have that. So we need to be exploiting that far more than we are right now.
You spoke about storage being an impediment. Talk to us about that and the need for having mechanisms that can store energy once it has been generated for future usage. Let me pass that to you, Mr. Winkler, and Mr. da Silva, you can take that to at the end. Mr. Winkler?
Yes. Well, that's really been possibly the biggest problem that one's had. If one looks at when is electricity needed the most, if you look at an hour-by-hour account, and it's usually around about now, when people are at home, they've got the lights on, if it's getting colder, so the heaters will be on. So that's what one refers to the evening peak. Then after about 10 o'clock goes down, and about 3 or 4 in the morning, it's at next to nothing. But so we need, you need some sort of batteries in a sense. And it's a bit like with a cell phone, you need to plug it in, and then you've got a power for a few hours and so on. So it's the same idea, but it's just that if you're trying to power your whole house, including some of the very electricity-heavy devices, then you're going to need very large batteries, and that's where the challenge has been. And it just hasn't been easy to develop batteries which are both small enough and cheap enough that you can actually store as much electricity as you'd really want. But things are happening there. It's one of the main areas of technological focus to try and improve this battery storage, in a sense, to find some other means in which you can actually just keep that electricity, if you like, ready for when you actually need it.
Mr. Da Silva, talk to us, if you would, about the country's integrated resource plan. The last one that was gazetted was around 2019, and I believe it has to actually be relooked every 2 years. How are we standing as far as the relevance of that plan for now and South Africa's future energy needs?
To be honest with you, I haven't actually followed up to date entirely. But look, as far as the rollout of all the plans that I've actually acknowledged and noticed, I mean the recent release of the new facility now that's actually just been partially completed. Obviously the budget plans keep increasing. We're achieving goals. However, obviously the intended costs are seemingly a problem, and I'm hoping obviously going forward the implementation of these plans are going to obviously have a better result. The new legislations and laws that have been done with the licensing of the solar aspect, I think it's a huge plus. All the restrictions as to being able to privatize or private companies being able to get involved and try and offer solutions and to the problem that we have now seem to be lifted a bit more. So I think in that respect we're going to have better results. I'm obviously following more the happening of what the solar side is actually going on. So that I'm seeing some good results. I'm seeing some really positive. Some positive headway from a lot of large corporations that are going to get involved. So we might be surprised of what might be happening, but yet still, to be honest, the problem of how we're going to get out of this big hole is still looming. We all trying to just do what we can to make things happen. However, obviously, we can only just hope, but we're still yet to see.
Mr. Winkler, the current use of renewables is at 10.5% at the moment of the electricity coming from renewables. How can this be increased? And is this something that can be achieved in the short term, or is this more of a long-term projection?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the integrated resource plan, and all electricity planning and developments are supposed to follow this plan. And as you rightly pointed out, it's supposed to be updated every 2 years to accommodate for any kind of patterns or shifts in technological developments. So at the moment, yes, there is a plan to grow renewable by it's of the order of something like 5% or so per year. And but it's certainly going to be a while until we reach what I think is at the moment the sort of the optimal level, which is 50%. And who knows, maybe sometime in the future it might go to 100%, but we're talking something probably 50 years down the line. So at the moment, yes, there are new renewable developments. There was recently this emergency power rollout, which is going unfortunately very slowly. In fact, it's probably not going to go any faster than any of the normal ones. And then I think this month is supposed to be another decision coming about when you're going to be installing.
Can I have their names, please?
Renewable plants.
Gentlemen, I thank you very much for your time this evening as we focus on the issue of electricity and power supply in South Africa. A couple of tips there that were bantered about for households on how you can actually be able to reduce your electricity consumption, how perhaps alternate forms of energy such as solar may be worth investing in, perhaps a bit of an outlay initially, but certainly towards the back end, according to the expert, it should be able to pay for itself. That was Director at Solar Advice, Mr. Armando da Silva, as well as Professor of Physics at the University of Johannesburg, Hartmut Winkler.